Good evening, Captain Retired Matt Edwards here with the next Observation Post Facebook Live report, weekly report for the 10th of August 2023. I'm going to try to whiz through the items that I've got on my list because I plan to do an ad hoc, impromptu discussion on the 2016 earnings loss benefit increase. And I might do another one that slips my mind at the moment, but I have, I'll recall it later, but I think, anyway, moving on to my points. I got two different things up in front of me. Okay, point number 311 that I have listed in my file that I called numbered list of issues that I've discovered. Now, got to be honest, some of these things I've thought of, and it's just from a different perspective maybe, but they seem new to me when I put them into my file, so I can elaborate on them when I talk to you right now. Did my reserve force pension plan buyback include a cost for bridging? Does the reserve force pension plan rely on the outdated concept that pensions are given freely to the employee from the employer? Now, the reason I ask that is that because the pension started in 2007, and I joined in 1999, the Canadian Forces, then they offered us the option to buy back. It's called an election. You can elect to buy back your service. So I elected to buy my service from 1999 to 2007. Now, later I got a bill from the Canadian Forces Pension Administration, and they said I owed $909 for bridging, and they reduced my pension, which was a paltry $200 or maybe $300 a month, and they reduced it by $50 a month. Now, there are many things wrong with the reserve force pension plan. For one thing, it uses a career average instead of using the best 5 years average salary. It uses the career average, which obviously gives a lower pension. And this is what makes me believe that they must thank the government who wrote the law that provides for this pension, that they're giving us something, a generous pension. Now, I've seen that word used a bunch of times in the Hansard, and it drives my blood pressure up. It causes me to boil over, because when you pay into a pension, you're basically saving money, okay? So you put some money away for the future. Now, when you retire, you get your money back. So you can't get a generous pension when they give you the money that they saved. They banked for you. They give it back to you. That's not generous. See? So how can they be stupid enough to keep bullshitting us about it? Now, so it's a ridiculous type system, okay? Like if you wanted to buy back your pension, a regular force soldier has to pay 4% simple interest, but a reserve force soldier has to pay 7% compound daily interest. So I think they were trying to dissuade people from electing to buy the pension back. Now, it's important for me because, well, I ended up getting the Canada Pension Plan Disability when I shouldn't have gotten it, and I'll speak briefly to that now because I recently found a letter dated the 31st of March 2014, and that letter reinforced the earlier 26 July 2013 letter, and in both of those they said you don't have enough contributions to qualify. Now, obviously I never wrote either letter at the time because Sun Life, who is the administrator for the Treasury Board Secretariat unionized workers policy, they pressured me into applying for the fourth time on 10th of September 2014. Now, this was after two letters where CPP expressly told me I couldn't get it. So I'm starting to think this is criminal, okay? It's a public law. The Canada Pension Plan is a public law. The 4 out of 6 year contribution rule is a law. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. And they forced me to apply knowing I couldn't legally get it. Now, the only thing I could think of, because they have all of your work history and you're in rehabilitation, so they know if you had any work to get more Canada Pension Plan contributions, so they know, or they ought to know, that you can't get Canada Pension Plan disability based on the law, based on the rules. I wouldn't be surprised if someone looks into this other than me with more investigative powers, if they discover that there is some kind of backroom deal where they say that they're helping us out by approving us illegally. I bet you something like that is in place. In fact, a veteran told me that a case manager at Veterans Affairs told him just that. Another veteran in Alberta, he didn't have anything in writing, but he recently told me that Manulife told him the same thing, verbally, so they could deny it later. Now, number 312 on the list, Income Tax Bulletin 428, paragraph 23, and taxes from long-term disability. They say, Canada Revenue Agency, no legal requirement for current year deductions. Now, the way I read it is that this doesn't say that you don't have to pay taxes, although I can tell you about 6 or 7, I was going to say 10, but 6 or 7 reasons off the top of my head why they can't tax long-term disability. Number 1, it's not income, it's insurance. Income Tax Act is designed to tax income. Therefore, because it's insurance, it can't be taxed as income. That's one reason. Number 2, in Canada, we don't tax a long-term disability insurance when you pay 100% of the premium. Now, the Canadian Forces regular force member pays 15% by direct payroll deduction since 1993. And they have 85% taken off or paid for them on behalf of them by the government. Now, I've seen no proof that this ever gets sent to Manulife. So the only payment that we know of is the payment that is taken off of the soldier. Now, there's a rule in law and contract law, a payment, consideration must be adequate, right? Not, I forget the other word, but they had 2 different words that they compared, and they accepted that amount to be deducted from your pay. Now, that's another reason. For reservists, you had to be hurt on duty in order to get your long-term disability, so that makes it like workers' compensation. So therefore, it shouldn't be taxed for reservists, for certain. Now, the income replacement benefit is made up largely of the Service Income Support Insurance Plan, that makes up 83.33% of the payment if you get medical release, and Veterans Affairs pays the difference. Now, workers' compensation is tax-free, tort lawsuits are paid tax-free, and the reason for this is because they're capital and not income. So if you get hurt and you sue the person who hurt you in tort, in law, you win, you get damages. Now, Income Tax 428 also states that you're getting indemnified for, which means compensated, for your lost income. Now, if they are arguing that this is a payment, the long-term disability payment is a compensation for your lost income, that squarely puts it into the realm of capital and not income. But they tax it as income and they don't tax it as capital. To tax something as capital, like a tort lawsuit damages, would be nigh impossible. Why? Because you have to have the starting price to compare to the selling price to calculate a capital gain. So because we don't know how much your health was worth or how much your body is worth, then you can't tax capital as income, and it's hard to tax it as capital. Anyway, number 313, because I want to move on to the other topics. I got to remember the second topic. But the other one, the first topic I planned to talk about, I had the picture up in my observation post group. Now, if I can ask people, just occurred to me when I'm watching YouTube videos. They often say like and subscribe. One of the reasons that I do these videos, don't think I like to see myself because I'm looking at my camera and you guys see my face and I see my face. I don't like to do this. But it has to be done in order that they get caught. In a democracy, we should have the right to expect the government to be honest, fair, to not lie, to not steal from disabled people, to uphold the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, all of these things that they ought to be doing, that they're not doing, and especially for a disabled and service veteran, is abominable. Okay, it's ridiculous. Now, what is the purpose of the Canada Pension Plan Act? Well, it's stated in the preamble. What it is to supplement. It's a comprehensive system to supplement old age payments. Now, to and in respect of, it says to contributors. Why did they say it that way? Because it's not a general system. You have to pay into it to get something from it. So they set up a program that has zero cost to the government. In 1966, when they enacted the Canada Pension Plan, after extensive years of negotiations with the provinces, because the provinces own the right to establish pensions. So in order to make a national Canada Pension Plan, they had to negotiate with the provinces, and the rule is that they can make laws about pensions as long as they don't change the provincial pension type system, which, by the way, is usually through the courts, not through the elected members of the House of Assembly or whatever you call your provincial elected members. There might be some laws that apply, but generally it's the law of trust, because anybody who is looking after a pension is a fiduciary and trust law applies. So they have to look after your best interest before their best interest. That's the rule. So, anyway, Canada has a retirement system, from what I've read, to be made up of 3 pillars, or tiers. They say that the Canada Pension Plan is the second one, the Old Age Security Act is the first one, the Canada Pension Plan is the second one, as I just stated, and the third one is Registered Pension Plans and Savings. So, the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act, the Public Service Superannuation Act, and the RCMP Superannuation Act, and the pitiful little pension I get, the Reserve Force Pension Plan, they're all what you call registered pension plans. They are private pension plans, even if they're authorized by public law. Again, they had to conform to provincial pension law, and pensions are property. So when they take the money from your check to make a contribution, which they shouldn't do, because your service ought to be enough, but they make you pay as well. But this makes it easier to prove my point about it being a forced savings plan, because they take actual money that they took, that you earned, and they put it away for your future. Now, I made a note in one of my notebooks. I keep trying to make written notes because I don't want to be always posting about things. So I made a note that I've talked about before, I've written about before, but up until the year 2000, the federal government, and probably provincial governments too, they never put away any money for pensions. They acknowledged it in writing, but because nobody ever thinks the government can go bankrupt, there was no actual money put into the bank and invested and stuff. But in the year 2000, they passed the law, Bill C-70 something, I think, 79 maybe. And then they started doing it the way they should have done it from the beginning. Now, the reason I know that is I saw it in an Auditor General's report from 1991 or 1994, and I posted that picture to my observation post group. And they said that this is just a paper liability, that the government is acknowledging it, that it owes money to the individual who contributed to the pension. But why I took out my notebook and made the note of it is that while the person put away real money, the contribution taken from the person's pay is real cash, the government never actually put money with it until after 2000. Now that seems like a scandal to me. What did they do beforehand? And did anybody acknowledge the actuarial liability and stuff? And, I mean, it's just insane that they did this. It's one of the things that, to me, they think that the government is above the law instead of applying the rules like normal pension operators, administrators. They said, well, we'll never go back to it. We'll never have trouble paying our bills. And, we'll just do it the way we've always done it. And we'll just keep track of what we owe people. Which brings up a point of mine. It's a debt. When you get a payment in a Canadian Forces or RCMP or Public Service or Reserve Force pension plan, you're getting a Crown debt paid back to you from the Crown because they banked the money for you in the past. See? So, in a way, that would be a good argument against not having to pay income taxes. But I agree with the government in this. They set up rules in the 1950s to encourage pensions, and they said that we will not count your income when you put it into the pension. We'll allow you a contribution to your pension at the time you make the contribution. We won't tax you when it's vested in the pension, but we will tax it when you draw it from the pension. So you got to pay taxes. They just decided to make it at the end instead of at the beginning or in the middle. Now, the problem with that, I just realized not long ago, and I might have already spoken about it if you pay attention to what I'm saying. Forget what I'm about to say. But I think we need to be allowed to get both contributions, what the government pays on our behalf that we earned, and what we earned, and they took it from our pay directly. So instead of only getting half of deduction and saving half of the money on taxes in the year you made the contribution, I think you need to be able to claim at least double. And why I say double, at least double, is that the 2007 Treasury Board report on total compensation talked about the fact that the government paid $3.78 for every dollar that was taken off of the Canadian Forces member. And this is why people say, at least in my expert opinion, that we have a generous pension. They think that the government pays most of the pension and that we don't pay very much. So therefore, they have more rights about it than we do. What they ought to do is look at this as salary. You earn your salary. You earn your pension. Stop complaining about the contribution rate because that's part of my salary and you got to pay for the services you get. So they seem to want things for nothing, which is where bridging comes in. They want to deduct one pension from another pension. And I've always said this just as a way to prove they're wrong. Well, if you're going to deduct one from the other, why don't they have the Canada Pension Plan deduct the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act pension? It seems so obvious that it's staring us right in the face. Instead of, for example, the Dennis Manouge class action had the Service Income Support Insurance Plan claw back the Pension Act pension. Well, why didn't the Pension Act pension claw back CPP? Right? They had a pretty good reason. They could invoke Section 25 of the Pension Act. So that claws back an indemnity for the same injury, the same event that caused injury. So a tort lawsuit and workers' compensation are two examples of things that get clawed back. But according to the long-term disability insurances, they indemnify you for your lost wages. Now, if they indemnify you for your lost wages, that puts it squarely in the realm of capital and not income, for one thing. But due to the compensation principle, you're not supposed to get over 100% for the event that caused your injury. Again, I agree with this. But deciding who gets to take who into account is the problem here. And CPP took advantage of the government not clawing CPP into account, taking CPP into account. So CPP decided to take the pension into account back in 1976. Anyway, number 314, because I'm getting really dry here tonight. Why is welfare and workers' compensation benefits tax-free? And the Pension Act pension, why is it tax-free? Now, I mean, a lot of people will say, oh, that's because we wrote a law saying they're tax-free. Section 110 of the Income Tax Act applies to workers' compensation. Section 81(1)(d) applies to the Pension Act pension. So we decided in our infinite wisdom that we wouldn't tax these payments. So therefore, that's why. Well, I'm sorry, that's not good enough. You have to have a reason for your doing something. And you can't tax capital as income. Jennings, 1966, Supreme Court of Canada. So in that case, the people who hurt the other person, they wanted to take taxes into account, hypothetically, so that they would have reduced damages to the person they hurt. The judge said, quite rightly, Canada Revenue Agency is not here to represent the government on taxes. And why should you get a benefit by reducing the payment of damages to the person you hurt? Now, in the night, and they said it was a capital payment, not income. Now, that was repeated in the 1978 Andrews versus Grandin Toy Supreme Court of Canada case. And they reiterated the fact that you're getting paid back a debt repayment. When you get a lawsuit win, you're getting a debt payment, damages. Someone has to make you whole. So they have to balance the scales. They cause you harm, so they give you money, to balance the scales. Now, in the case of welfare, that's charity. So the government in a democracy can't let people starve. So the government decides to pay people the lowest amount of money that they can pay in order to let them meet the cost of living. Now, the income replacement benefit and the service income support insurance plan are basically forms of welfare. Why do I say that? Because they have income testing. Now, governments use two forms of testing to decide how to limit the amount of money that they pay to poor people. One is called means testing, and means testing includes income and assets. So if you apply for provincial welfare, they will ask how much money you got in the bank, and probably ask for bank statements. That's because they look at assets and income. Now, under federal programs such as the old age security and income replacement benefits and other stuff, they only look at income, which is easier to get. They just get it from Canada Revenue Agency. But the thing is that when you get a payment for an income replacement benefit, you're supposed to be getting a payment to compensate you for your injury. It's not welfare, it's a debt repayment. So they're treating it like welfare, and treating it like welfare also makes it cheaper for them. Okay? Now, I better stop doing this and get into at least one of the two topics, I think, because of the way my throat is really dry tonight. Even though I'm having a sip of my Diet Pips this year, I'm still dried out. I still got that hole from 3 weeks ago when I had my tooth changed. In fact, my voice sounds a bit different to me. Anyway, I want to analyze the CBC story about the October 2016 increase in earnings loss benefit, which is now called income replacement benefit. Now, I was thinking about finding the story and then reading it out, but I can't find it right now, and I want to get it done. So I'll just look at the numbers, and I'll explain. And I was recently talking to a Member of Parliament Small, his office in central Newfoundland, and I was explaining to him how, not him, but the lady that works for him, I was explaining to them that there's a veteran out in Cape Breton, Newfoundland, Corporal retired Tommy Anderson. Tommy, I did a story or two on him in the past. He lost 2 legs below the knee in 1994 in Croatia. So his Iltis drove over 3 stacked Russian or Soviet anti-tank mines, and it blew the shit out of the Iltis. Took off his legs below the knee. So he only had a couple of years in the military, so he had to get medical release. He ended up on CPP. He got the Pension Act. Now, unlike many other people, he doesn't have Canada Pension Plan. He doesn't have the Canadian Forces Pension. All he has was the Service Income Support Insurance Plan and the Pension Act. And he didn't get all of his CPP until they won the lawsuit. He was one of the people in the Dennis Mnuchin class action. Now, when I was talking to him back in 2016, because I was writing that story and I was chatting and getting the details, data to write my story, I don't want to have the facts straight. He happened to ask because he knew that I know a lot of stuff about this shit. He said, "Matt, listen, how much am I going to get from the new increase in the earnings loss benefit?" Well, I said, "How much do you get right now in CPP?" Well, about $4,000 a month. Well, I said, by my calculations, you should get about $800 because I'm simply taking the increase, which is 15%, going from 75 to 90%, and then I'm putting it over in a fraction, 75%, which is the initial figure, and then if you reduce that down by straight math, you get 1 over 5, which is 0.2, which is 20%. So $4,000 a month gives you $800 a month. That's how much you should expect. By the Jesus, if they didn't send them a check for $1.39, that's shocking. That's insane. And I told the Member of Parliament staffer, that's not the only person, and I have the figures right here. 165 disabled veterans got $1.39. Somebody should investigate what kind of fucking accounting that Veterans Affairs Canada does to get, instead of $800 a month, to give a fella $1.39. It's cheaper probably not to send them a check because of the postage. Wouldn't you agree? Don't think anybody ever explained. I put a lot of effort into that, contacting his Member of Parliament, contacting the Judy Foote, who used to be the Public Works and Government Services Minister or something before she retired years ago. Contacting his new MP, like it's crazy how much, like it's insane. And all of these other people though, because according to my addition, CBC didn't add it up, but I put in figures in my spreadsheet, there was 5,220 people who got the increase, some form of increase. Now I didn't get the increase because they denied my request for rehabilitation. So back then, in October 2016, I was trying to tell the government, you can't tell us no. You can't tell us we're not getting the increase because the program arrangement's there that CPP is the first provider, and if we don't have income replacement benefit, earnings loss benefit now, then you have to give it to us without application. Of course, they didn't do it, and people like me fell through the cracks. It ain't right. Now, but I'm going to go through the other figures. Okay, 28 people got a check between $25 and $49. 74 people, disabled veterans, got between, oh, I did that wrong. 28 people got $3 and $24, okay? 74 people got between $25 and $49. 145 people got $50 to $99. 601 got between $1 and $200. 753, and the numbers are going up as you can see, except for the bottom tier. 753 disabled and service veterans got between $201 and $499. So the brackets are getting bigger too. 428 got $500 to $749. 2,187 got between $750 and $999, and this is squarely where I think Tom should have fell. In the top category, 839 disabled and service Canadian veterans were paid between $1,000 and $1,999 extra. Now, I got to be honest, I haven't put much thought into that, but I don't understand how they could have gotten a 20% increase and got that much extra. Their accounting is so bad. They're probably going to get a bill one of these days that they're going to say, we paid you too much. Can't help but say it. Now, I worked out the totals. And these are ballpark figures. At the bottom end of my estimate, there's $2,914,116. That would be the lower end of what I call the damages that, Mac screwed up. And on the top end, it came be $4,697,146. Now, the government should get things right. A lot of people probably were impressed that the government moved from 75 to 90% of pay back in October of 2016. They weren't trying to help anybody. They were just trying to buy votes. Pretty cynical, but I bet you the viewers here are also cynical about the government and their actions. But they also reduced their costs by doing what they did to Tom. How many people would notice the problem, right? He happened to be talking to me, and a lot of people don't believe what I say because, well, I haven't had any wins yet. I've had some veterans that have gotten wins, but they're not in the news, and there's not a court case and stuff. For example, Master Warrant Officer Dan Mansfield got a pretty big refund because they were deducting Canada Pension Plan from both SISIP and Income Replacement Benefit and the Canadian Forces Pension. So Veterans Affairs Canada sent him back a check. Sergeant Gerard Parsons, retired, he got back $60,000 from Great West Life. Sean Lewis, I think he got $60,000 back. Now, these are some anecdotals, but, I kind of fail with Gina's earnings loss benefit case. She did win the case when she took it to court, but I don't think they should have reinstated their earnings loss benefit after the year that they kicked her off. They should have gave her the payment during the period that she had taken to court. She took him to court and won, and they lowballed her, screwed her over by ignoring the court order. I called Kent Harris off and gave the staffer there a earful. I said, you can go to jail, tell the member of parliament, for ignoring a court order. This veteran went to court because they got cut off. She got cut off and she shouldn't have got cut off. And she won in court. And then they didn't pay her back the damages for the year that she missed in earnings loss benefit. You sort that out. Don't think they did. In fact, I'm trying to decide if I should tell you this story. She called me up 6 months or so ago, and she's rowing. And she happened to end up on the same team rowing up in Victoria as either her current or former case manager, and she was worried that this could affect her because she don't trust Veterans Affairs Canada. I said, listen, in a perfect world, hopefully the case manager won't be an asshole. Ask her maybe, talk to her and see what's on the go, but, don't just have paranoid fears about it. I mean, hopefully the person has a bit of a conscience. But I don't trust a lot of these people. But I'll tell you what I think it is, the same as I told that member of parliament staffer. I believe these people think that they can simply say, we were obeying the law. We didn't do anything wrong. Well, I got news for them. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Since 1987, Canada has been prosecuting people for obeying the letter of the law and ignoring the spirit and intent of the law. So in other words, they charge people for obeying the law. So if Veterans Affairs employees, I'm half thinking of a calendar union to see if I can get their support to say, your workers here are treating veterans pretty bad. Shouldn't they try obeying the law? Because they might get in trouble for obeying the letter of the law as per the Veterans Wellbeing Act regulations, but ignoring the spirit and intent of the law. And if they say, we can't get in trouble for doing that, well, tell that to Canada Revenue Agency. Since 1987, they've been prosecuting people who have been obeying the letter of the law. And your Veterans Affairs case managers, they have been obeying the letter of the law. So, somebody could throw the book at them and they could go to jail or lose their job, even though they thought they didn't do anything wrong. Because here's the thing. I spoke to Deputy Minister, Assistant Deputy Minister, whatever the fuck it is, General Walton Tinchuk, 2018, at a town hall here in Newfoundland. And the issue was people who had been on the get a job with the federal government if you're disabled and medical release from the Canadian Forces. It has a 5-year limit. And people were saying, I'm not healed up. Like, my 5-year time limit's almost over. And it's no good of me trying to get a job. I'm not healthy enough yet. I'm not rehabilitated. But the people at Public Works and Government Services, or where the fuck that calls them these days, they're applying the letter of the law, and it's too bad, so sad after 5 years. I said, General, what you have to do is tell these people about the use of discretion. Every public servant has a certain amount of discretion when they apply the law. Some public servants have a lot of discretion, and they can choose a wide variety of things to do. Some public servants have very little discretion, but they always have some. So what they need to do is look at the person who's not fully rehabilitated, look at the law that says 5 years is the time limit, and then if it takes 5.5 years or 6 years, they ignore that fucking law, because the purpose of the law is to help the person get a job, even if they're disabled. Tell me I'm wrong. I think I'm right. But most people just want to do their job. I often said about people working at Canada Revenue Agency, where I used to work as a tax collector, I'd like to know why I'm doing something. Most people just want to know how to do their job. So me wanting to know why I'm doing certain things would often get me in trouble. Because I'm not just there doing my job and going to work, eating and lunch and taking my coffee breaks and then going home and then forgetting about it till the next day, rinse and repeat. I'd like to know why we're collecting this or why we're doing that or what the procedures are. I mean, I just am a curious person, see? But the people that are working for the public service just want to get paid for applying the law, and they don't think about the fact that they're probably harming the person who put their life on the line for Canada. Now, that imposes what the 1997 War Amputations of Canada Ontario Court of Appeal case called. They said that the soldier gets paid the Pension Act pension for 3 reasons. The first one is the debt Canada owes to the person who became injured in service. The second one is gratitude. And the third one is sustenance. Now, the first one, paying back the person the money they're owed for getting hurt, that's the most important one, they said. The debt of gratitude, well, how the fuck are you going to measure that? But you often hear that the country owes the veterans a debt of gratitude. Now, the one sustenance, I wish they had shut their fucking mouth and not said nothing, because that's welfare. You could have left it at 2 things. We're paying the Pension Act because of the debt we owe you and the gratitude that we feel towards you. They could have stopped right there and not said nothing about fucking welfare. But to many people, that's what the payments the government gives someone who can't work. Right? So, in a way, I'm not trying to justify it for them, but they think that they're helping the government. They're helping the taxpayer by reducing the amount of money people pay in taxes by clawing back all of the things that they can and reducing the tax burden on all the healthy people that can work. They think this is a good thing. Well, if we were in a war, you'd think they'd be a little bit grateful, to use that word, for the people out risking their lives to protect these pricks. I think that people don't understand. They think that all this stuff is a big abstract idea. That's Tommy Anderson, who lost 2 legs. He was on a UN tour. He came back from a previous one where he hadn't got hurt, and he volunteered for another one because they were short-handed. And they repaid him by clawing back his Pension Act pension from the Service Income Support Insurance Plan from 1994 to 2012. 16 goddamn years. And they paid him back a lot of money. And they fucked up his taxes. He sent me his taxes too to look at. I said, Tom, look at what they're doing here. On line 260, which is the taxable income, they got it listed down as $145,000. By the time they take lawyers' fees and this and that and other thing, the $600,000 payment that he got netted down to $145,000 in taxable income. But I said, then look at line 435, Tom. You paid $160,000 on $145,000 in income. You're not supposed to pay 110% or 115% of what you made in taxes. Who would work if you had more taxes than you had in income? Now, I had a reporter lined up to do a story on that he said would be a national story. How bad they're treating not only Tom, there's other veterans like that. But then Tom developed cancer, and that caused him to forget about the news story I had lined up. Sometimes I feel like I'm an agent or something. So they still haven't fixed that. Now the problem on that, and I've probably spoken about it before, and here I am yammering on again. The problem with that is what they call the qualifying retroactive lump sum payment. So it's called a QRLSP. And if they were doing it according to the way they said it on the books, okay, we want people to pay less taxes. If you got all the money in 1 year as a lump sum, then you'd have a high marginal tax rate in that year. And so we're going to let you spread that out over all of the years that the payment covered if it's a lump sum and it covers multiple years. Now that sounds good, right? Then some fucking yahoo decided to put compound daily interest at Treasury bill plus 2% on the money because Canada's out time value of the money, they said. So basically it's a late filing penalty. So you had Tom who had to take the government to court. The government refused to pay him what he should have got. And when he finally did get the damages the court ordered the government to pay, they then mitigated their damages to an enormous extent using the qualifying retroactive lump sum payment. Penalty is what I would call it. It's not a tax. A tax is something you levy on, you charge against income or something. This is a penalty for filing late. But he had no choice about it because he couldn't file it when he wasn't getting the money. He had to sue to get the fucking money. I'm surprised I'm still sane dealing with all this shit. And the people that I'm talking to are still sane. It's maddening. No reasonable person, I think, would do the things that are being done to us. And whoever came up with that cockamamie idea to put Treasury bill plus 2% compound daily interest because Canada's out time value of money, and yet they robbed $1.07 billion from disabled World War II veterans who couldn't look after their own affairs in the Arthurson Supreme Court of Canada case in 2003. And the Supreme Court let the government get away with it. They said when the government writes clear laws to expropriate people's property without giving them compensation, they can do so. And I say, go fuck yourself, Supreme Court of Canada. You're not supposed to steal someone's property without compensating them for it. If you need to take someone's land to build a road, it's for the public good. You expropriate it, you pay that person a fair market value, and there you go. But he might not like it, but it's legally right. He was compensated. But if you're going to take someone's compensation for their injury, and that is the compensation, and how can you compensate someone for the compensation they're getting? It had to be a $1-to-$1 exchange. If you had to give a person compensation for the expropriation, and the expropriation is compensation, do you see how ridiculous this is? It's retarded. I shouldn't use that word. It's not in vogue these days. It's not politically correct. But it's absolutely insane. But I can draw some inferences from this, some facts. They said that the interest which was at issue is property. That's important. It's not income, it's property. So they expropriated the property of the person, but we can use that against them because, I mean, listen, I better not get into it or I'll be here all day. 45 minutes is enough for tonight. I'm getting really dried out. Sometimes I get a little disheartened about the fact that nothing's getting done to get fixed. All this stuff, I'm trying to educate people, basically. Like I wrote a column today. I haven't done as many columns as usual recently, but I keep writing these little pieces where I try to make a narrative and try to put facts into it. And then I try to get people to realize what's happening, to wake up and smell the coffee. And they shouldn't be lying about their identity, for example. That was the subject, I believe, of my... I got it up here now to remind me of what I called it. But, plausible deniability, I called it. In fact, I'll read it off to you. It shouldn't take a few minutes. I'll see how long it takes for me to read it. Plausible deniability. I wanted to try to bring in a little bit about current events. Russia uses private military corporation PMC Wagner as a means of plausible deniability. It wants what appears to be an arm's length between it and Wagner is doing for Russia. That should be no great surprise, as they want things to be confusing so they get their way. Strange that Canada also uses this tactic to make things unclear for the long-term disability policies of insurance that it underwrites and then hires a company to administer the policy on behalf of the Crown. It fails to disclose to the voting public about the relationship it has with its public servants, Canadian Forces, and RCMP members. In fact, the Manouche Federal Court 2012 case had McInnes Cooper, the law firm representing Dennis Manouche, correctly judge that the Service Income Support Insurance Plan Policy 90102 is an administrative services only, or ASO policy, insurance plan. The Department of Justice lawyers objected to that fact, saying that CPP is not a fee-for-services policy. Obviously, they did not think about the fact that Canada, the Crown, was sued and not Manulife, the administrator. Why would the government of Canada want to create plausible deniability? Insurers, and Canada is one of those, uses tactics to delay, deny, confuse, and refuse in order to maximize profits, according to a tell-all book about insurance in the 1990s. Refusing to disclose your true identity is prima facie causing much confusion, so they are achieving their nefarious purpose. While the Manouche Federal Court 2012 case proceeded entirely against the Crown, later cases might have trouble identifying the party to be sued. Now, I'm referring to me, be honest, because a lot of people say, who should we sue? Another plausible, yes, I intended to use this word as a reinforcement against them denying it, is the failure to remit statutory deductions imposed by the Crown. The irony is incredible. The rule of law states that the government must hold itself accountable to the law. Yet employment insurance premiums and Canada Pension Plan contributions are not deducted from either the Veterans Affairs Canada Income Replacement Benefit and CPP long-term disability. Manulife appears to be doing this in the case of CPP, but what is the government thinking when the Crown does it too openly? The Manouche case ended the practice of taking the Pension Act pensions into account to save the taxpayers' money on the CPP long-term disability program. Manulife took the money into account, not the Crown, at least on paper. In reality, it was a Crown saving because of another Crown payment. Recall, it was not Manulife that got sued. In the related RCMP case, Great West Life did not get sued. So we have two concluded court cases against the Crown where Canada paid damages, not the two aforementioned alleged insurers. Is the government so stupid that it would take the liability on for private and for-profit insurance companies? Again, on paper, it would appear that this is the case, unless they admit there is an administrative service-only policy in place where the insurance proceeds are pooled from premiums to pay the unlucky few who become disabled and cannot serve Canada any longer. That's simply how all insurance works. A brief recap of my extensive and unrivaled research into that matter. I can't help half brag and half pat myself on the back ears. I don't think anybody knows as much about this shit as I do. I probably forgot more than other people know. Insurers in Canada failed to develop the market for long-term disability insurance. Don't ask me where my reference is, I just know that that's a fact. Employers stepped into the insurance vacuum and hired insurance companies to do the paperwork, hence the rise of administrative services only policies. Canada is an employer, the largest in Canada. Employers, not insurers, save with clawbacks. That's a grave conflict of interest. Why is it a serious and possibly criminal breach of trust? There appears to be three parties in the federal long-term disability policies. A, the Crown. B, the insurance company that appears to be the insurer, deceiving everyone but the parties to the contract. And C, the insured employee. Any dispute between the insured and the insurer would be none of the Crown's business due to privity of contract if there was really an insurance contract between the company and the employee. In reality, there are only two parties. In reality, there are only two parties in any dispute between the insured and the employer. The alleged insurer is the agent to the Crown. As such, due to the law of agency, they are the same legal party. A two-party dispute has each side taking their own position as gospel and would require the courts to adjudicate as there is a vested interest in each party. This is a serious breach of utmost good faith, as well as due process procedural rights, which require an independent judge. While this piece is a little longer, because I was getting tired of typing, than I envisioned, I hope it sheds some light on the massive fraud that Canada, the Crown, is performing by using what appears to be an independent insurer. It realizes huge savings at the expense of Canadian society. Just in case you don't get it, I'll spell it out in excruciating detail again. Canadian Forces members and RCMP members protect others who refused the call of duty, imposing a burden on the Crown for taking this risk to personal safety. Civilians have the right to refuse dangerous work at law. Instead of simply saying that Canadians will insure you against disabilities, the Crown sets up an elaborate ruse to deceive everyone but those in on the conspiracy to defraud the disabled. Now that's despicable, I think. A Canadian Forces member or RCMP member who is disabled in the line of duty has a legal and equitable debt owed to them by the nation they won't serve. Compensation for injury is the term, and it repays the debt, so it cannot be taxed, for example, as the payment is akin to a tort lawsuit and is designed to make the person whole, but no more. So you get paid back what you're owed, but not a cent more. Clawbacks reduce the compensation paid under the income replacement benefit, but CPP long-term disability does not compensate at all. It is legally a non-indemnity and contributory payment. I put my reference in there saying I was getting on and on and on. Salts, British Columbia Court of Appeal, 2006. So it cannot claw back, nor can it be clawed back by Veterans Affairs, for example, owing to that it's not a form of compensation. So they're apples and oranges. Again, I'm cringing myself as I'm still typing. This is a huge part of my problem as I do things to make more complex, even though I'm trying to make it simple. In my defense, I am responding to the deceptions used by the Crown that we want served, and they could have told the truth from the start, but chose to make things confusing and delaying payment, reducing or eliminating payments whenever they can, when the non-indemnity nature of the things that I speak of means you're supposed to get them anyway, stacked with other payments. See, that's a term that people invented, I think, to make it sound bad. I saw it when I was reviewing the bridging program. They were talking about pensions being stacked versus integrated. Now, when you get a payment that's a non-indemnity payment, nobody can touch it. Okay? Nobody. It is inviolable. You can't touch it, okay? And they put into the law, besides the fact that it's non-indemnity in the common law, they also put into the statutory law protections. Canadian Forces Superannuation Act, Section 83. Canada Pension Plan Act, Section 65(1). The Veterans Wellbeing Act, Section 89. Pension Act, Section 30. All of these examples were brought up in a 1995 case when somebody wanted to get a public service superannuation act pension to satisfy a debt for divorce. The Department of Justice intervened in that case because it had an effect on federal pensions, and they said to the judge, listen, judge, if you give her what she wants, you're going to be ordering the government to violate the laws that it put in place to protect people's money. Seems pretty clear to me that the Department of Justice was right. I don't have to go to court to prove what Section 30 of the Pension Act is or Canadian Forces Superannuation Act, Section 83. It's already been to court, and there is a precedent set by the Department of Justice. So, this is why I know everybody can't know every ruling in law and stuff, but in the Manouche case, why didn't the Department of Justice lawyers just roll over in the first little bit instead of arguing a stupid case because they couldn't win? I mean, that Beattie versus Ladouceur, Ontario Superior Court 1995 case, the Department of Justice intervened. That organization knows what those laws are intended to do. So when McInnes Cooper said to the government, you're breaking Section 30 of the Pension Act, the Department of Justice should have said, oh shit, you're right, and then settled the case. Because the government went ahead and did what they called a duty to defend itself in court. But there's another side to that coin called the duty to sell. If you're the person who wronged someone and you know you're wrong, you're not supposed to fight it in court and hope to win. You're supposed to settle it because you know you're wrong. Well, the Department of Justice should have used their duty to settle. The Manouche case. I think there's even a second Manouche case. I do believe, I'm not up on all the facts anymore, but I believe he took on with McInnes Cooper the $100 million incredible accounting blunder that they call it, which was when the government failed to follow the law with respect to using the wage index instead of the consumer price index. Now, I'm a curious person. That's what gets me into trouble. And I recently went and looked at, because if you looked at the Pension Act, you'd see that the rate is very low compared to what it is paid these days for the 100% pension. Well, you got to put inflation on it. They don't change it in the Act. You can't look up the Act now and see what it should be now. You got to do what I do, I guess, and go to the Bank of Canada Consumer Price Index, and then punch in the figure from 1985, and then punch in the figure, because I have a copy of a 2016 amount, how much the Pension Act, so I used 1985 to 2016, and then it punched out, and it spit out, here is how much inflation has adjusted this amount. The reason I did that is I'm wondering if Veterans Affairs failed to do the wage index in other years besides 2003 to 2010. So I don't know if that would prove it, but it might go to show that there were other years that the government failed to obey the law. Anyway, listen, that's enough for me. It's an hour talking again, and I do appreciate people watching. If you see that what I'm saying, I'm not off my record, try sharing the news around a bit, and I'm starting to think I got to get serious about suing these bastards. And I'm thinking what might get me on the go is if I can go to the lawyers and say, look, I have 2 letters from Canada Pension Plan saying I was not legally eligible to get the Canada Pension Plan. And yet, I was forced into applying for the 4th time after my first 3 applications were denied. The 4th application, which was made after the 2nd letter, was approved. Now, I think this is gross negligence, because the law should have been obeyed, and they didn't obey it. So the person who had a duty of care to obey the law, the person working at Canada Pension Plan, the Service Canada person, they've caused me irreparable harm by approving my Canada Pension Plan Disability. Well, the lawyer will probably say, aren't you happy you got it? Then I'll say, fuck no. I lost it off my public service pension. I lost it off my reserve force pension. I lost it off my system. I lost it off my Sun Life. Now, if you can say that that's a benefit, you need to get your head examined. Can't help it the way my mom works. So in 2016, I went to McInnes Cooper. I wanted them to represent the class. They said no. But they gave me a frivolous reason. They said that the guy that I was talking to here in St. John's, it wasn't his reason, but the people up in Halifax called him and said they looked at this issue about the Canada Pension Plan clawback and the assisted policy, and they said there was nothing there, and too bad. On the way out, I was talking to the lawyer. I'm trying to remember his name. David Eddings, I think might come Eddie or Eddings. Anyway, he said, well, I said, this is stupid. You know, I'm losing more money than I get. Well, you get what you pay for, he said. I said, that's not the point. I'm not getting what I paid for. I paid for all these other things, and I'm getting less because I got approved for Canada Pension Plan. And I walked out in a daze because I couldn't believe they turned me down when they had a surefire win. Okay, if you get $1,000 Canada Pension Plan, you shouldn't lose $2,650. If you can't win that case, you're not a competent law firm. Okay? That's one of the reasons I haven't gotten a lawyer since, is because I can't trust them. Their sense of judgment. You should be able to look at that and say, that's not equitable. And say, we can get you a remedy. And then they might be able to say, well, you know, there's not just you that this happens to. Let's launch a class action. It would dwarf the Manouche case. The Pension Act is only paid to people who get injured in service to Canada. The Canada Pension Plan is applicable to all people in Canada who work. It would be a huge class action. Then add to the fact that the double dip and the triple dip clawbacks happen, where both the Canadian Forces Pension and CPP and Veterans Affairs all take the Canada Pension Plan Disability account. I mean, it should be no brainer that some law firm would take it, but you know, so far. In fact, one of the more recent times I was talking to McInnes Cooper, they turned me down. They said, listen, we don't take any more cases from veterans. No, I don't. They don't owe me. They're a private company. But not long after that, they took on Manouche again for that previous case. Now, I could see their point. They previously had him as a client. They won their case, and they got a huge payday in court from him being their client. But, you know, it kind of stings a bit. I mean, I wanted them to take the burden off my shoulders, to represent me and the other people, and take it to court. And that was in 2016, and we could probably have a resolution. But instead of that, I'm still talking to the void. Well, I see people are watching, but sometimes it reminds me when I started doing Twitter tweets. I didn't realize that you had to tweet to someone. And I was making a tweet and never going to know them because I didn't have an address that I sent to somebody else or something like that. And I had no followers at the time. Now I got it like 2,100 or something like that. I used 1,700, now it's 2,100 there when I was active on it. Now, listen, again, talk too much. Wish this didn't happen. See, in my perfect world, in a democratic nation like Canada, the government would be above reproach. Instead of having the Department of Justice say to McInnes Cooper and the judge, we didn't break Section 30 of the Pension Act. Here's Black's Law definition, dictionary definitions for assign, charge, and whatever other legal words that they were using, because that's the words that were in the Pension Act, Section 30. But the Department of Justice wrote Section 30 for the government. They shouldn't have been arguing that they weren't breaking the law that they helped design. I think that's a fatal conflict of interest. They should have hired an independent law firm because they were complicit in designing Section 30 of the Pension Act, and therefore they couldn't comment on it because they weren't independent. I know they're not a judge, but they still have ethical standards and stuff. Listen, again, see you next week. Thanks for watching.